He didn't ever leave the house. He just opened the door. The kids were one step ahead of me. They're 5 and 7. They were one step ahead of me, and he slammed the door in my face.
New tonight, 911 calls give more details about the final moments for Josh Powell and his 2 boys. The Pierce County Sheriff's Department in Washington released the recordings just a few hours ago.
The calls came from a caseworker, Powell's sister, and his attorney. News specialist Sandra Yee joins us from Washington State with more on those phone calls and how the investigation has progressed.
Deanie and Bruce, authorities continue to delve into the life of Josh Powell. This afternoon, authorities here in Pierce County served a search warrant at his storage shed. Court documents also reveal that police in Utah were treating his wife's disappearance as murder. Police may have been building their case against him. He had lost custody of his kids. People who called 911 knew that he was desperate.
I was just there, and there is somebody here. There's 2 little boys in the house, and they're 5 and 7, and there's an adult man. He has supervised visitation, and he blew up the house and the kids.
A frantic call from a caseworker, the last person to see Josh Powell and his kids alive.
He slammed the door in my face, so I kept knocking. I thought it was a mistake. I kept knocking, and then I called 911.
Minutes before, in her initial call to 911, she knew something was wrong.
I'd like to pull out of the driveway because I smell gasoline, and he won't let me in.
At this point, the kids had already been inside with Powell for 10 minutes. Her instincts that Powell was desperate were right.
This could be life-threatening. He went to court on Wednesday, and he didn't get his kids back. And this is really, I'm afraid for their lives.
Before the explosion, an email and forwarded voicemail caught the attention of Powell's sister, who made this emotional call to 911.
I think my brother might be in trouble or something. What's going on with your brother? I don't know, he's sending weird emails, he's saying goodbye and stuff. He sent several emails saying stuff about how to handle his property or something, how to cancel utilities.
Alina Powell tells the dispatcher her brother is a victim.
I know this stuff has been hard on him. The abuse is extremely difficult.
Powell also sent an email to his attorney that simply read, "I'm sorry, goodbye." The attorney told authorities the blast was no accident.
I apparently get an email from my client, and that email gives me every indication this was intentional.
With Josh Powell gone, West Valley City Police have shifted their focus to his father, Stephen, who is named a person of interest in Susan Powell's disappearance. The police chief saying he is not a suspect at this point, just someone who may know something about what happened to her. Reporting live in Pierce County, Washington, I'm Sandra Yee, KSL 5 News.
Those recordings give you pause. Sandra, thank you.
For many of us who never met the Powells, Sunday's murders and suicide still somehow seem personal. The impact of Charlie and Braden's deaths is being felt across the country, and especially here in Utah.
It's a sad story, a sad ending to a sad story.
Communication expert Matt Townsend says we're all so invested in Susan's story and wanting the best for Braden and Charlie. We're all feeling the impact of Josh Powell's actions.
It was all very public. We suffered it, we suffered it, we suffered it. We're going to suffer the tragedy of it at the end as a community. And then what we'll do is we'll rise from it as a community.
Talking about it, mourning publicly, and expressing anger is all part of healing. It connects us and makes us feel like we're doing something productive after something so horrific, Townsend says, as long as we use those emotions the right way.
So we don't want to follow Josh's lead and become angry and bitter and unable to let go of this. Instead, now's the time we turn it into something that we can do.
At Hunter High School today, students mourned the loss of the Powell boys by dressing in their Sunday best. The students felt it was their way to show support for the boys who live near their school.
I think a lot of people are sad and shocked and they're flabbergasted.
The funeral for the Braden and Charlie Powell family will be held this Saturday in Washington State. It will be at 1 o'clock Pacific time at the LDS Stake Center in Puyallup.
Stephen Powell will stay behind bars for more than a year for his conviction of voyeurism. The judge today sentenced him to 30 months with credit for time served. News specialist Sandra Yee was in the courtroom for the hearing and is live in Washington State with reaction. Sandra?
Well, Dave, Stephen Powell kept his silence when the judge asked him if he had anything to say before sentencing. Powell just replied, "No, sir." Well, the mother of his 2 young victims had plenty to say. She had harsh words for Powell. She said that he caused her daughters embarrassment and heartache.
You've sat there smugly as if it's perfectly normal to have committed your crimes.
Stephen Powell had no words or emotion, even as the mother of his victims, who asked not to be identified, gave him a harsh reprimand.
Shame on you for not admitting what you did was wrong and not admitting that you did it at all.
She asked the judge to keep Powell behind bars for as long as possible. The judge said the crime warranted an exceptional sentence, but he also said the case's notoriety was a challenge. Powell's daughter, Alina, defended her father's silence because of that.
I think in this case, there's nothing to say. There's nothing you can say because this is too politicized and too publicized.
She isn't truly convinced Powell is guilty. She also can't help but wonder if her father is being punished for the disappearance of Susan Powell.
Everything I've ever known about him is that he's a wonderful, caring man, loving toward everybody, always very kind, generous, giving.
But the sentence wasn't good enough for Susan's family. Her father, Chuck, says he didn't expect a lot of justice.
In our justice system, it seems like the rights of the criminals are higher than the rights of the victims.
And he's going to stalk other women. He's going to stalk other children. It's not safe.
Stephen Powell's legal troubles aren't over. Cox family attorney Ann Bremner filed a civil lawsuit on behalf of the 2 young girls in the voyeurism case. Part of the suit involves they're getting their hands on investigative records from Pierce County, Washington authorities. Today, the judge allowed Bremner to personally serve the papers to Stephen Powell.
Well, I walked into the jury room and he was there sitting with his lawyers, and he did look at me, and I put the paperwork over toward him hoping that he would touch it. He did not. His lawyers acknowledged that he was served and thanked me. It was all cordial, quiet.
The Cox family has also given Bremner the go-ahead to sue West Valley City Police. The hope is that all the records will provide more answers into Susan's disappearance. Well, Powell is appealing his sentencing as well as the search warrant on his home. Powell will be back here in the Pierce County Courthouse in August for a restitution hearing. Reporting live in Tacoma, Washington, Sandra Yee, KSL 5 News.
Sandra, thanks. Stephen Powell. He's the father-in-law of Susan Powell. They exposed his extreme and twisted infatuation with Susan. News specialist Jennifer Stagg went through the journals tonight. Jen, these go back almost 10 years.
Yeah, Dave, that's right. Stephen Powell is currently in a Washington state prison. He was convicted earlier this year of 14 counts of voyeurism, but his diaries show he was obsessed with Susan and took pictures and video of her without her knowledge up to 6 years before she disappeared.
My greatest problem, as well as my greatest pleasure, lies in the fact that for over a year I have been madly in love with my daughter-in-law, Susan. That is a journal entry from Stephen Powell's spiral notebook diary from January 2003, and the more than 2,000 pages that follow outline in great detail his obsession and fantasies with Susan. I'm falling more in love with Susan, he wrote, but what has driven me primarily is lust. I have never lusted for a woman as I do for Susan, and I can hardly control myself when it comes to her. Another entry, this girl is unbelievably beautiful to me. Just seeing her is a thrill to me. Nearly every entry is about her, his fantasies and disturbing actions. He wrote that he found a box of her pictures and teenage journals. He then spent months copying them. He would steal her undergarments, even the hair from her hairbrush, and would stick a mirror under the bathroom door when she showered or used the restroom. He also captured her on video without her knowledge. When it comes to Susan, I stop at nothing, he wrote. I know some people would think I am strange or even sick for collecting articles of Susan's lingerie. The journals total 17 volumes and span 10 years. There is a peculiar lack of entries between October 2009 and May 2010. When the writing resumed, Powell talked about his theories of Susan Powell running off with another man, a theory discounted by police. But the vulgar fantasies about Susan continued even then.
Now, the journals do not talk about Josh Powell's murder-suicide with his 2 young sons. Police did release documents with new details about the explosion, but simply they are too horrific for us to report. Dave, a judge ruled the journals were inadmissible in court during Stephen Powell's voyeurism trial, except for a few excerpts where he admits to taking pictures of women and other young girls. Back to you.
Thanks, Jen. The story just gets more unbelievable.
Indeed.